Now. All right, welcome back to Under the Bar. We're at episode 5 here with Jason Fitzsimmons. Fitzy's a current scout with the Washington Capitals. Been with them, I believe, since maybe '08, '07, around there, Fitz?
Yeah, '07 was my first year, and here we are. I think I'm going into my 13th or 14th year now, and time flies. But thanks for having me on, Reader. I'm honored, and I'm excited to be on here and talk some hockey here in these crazy times of what's going on in the world right now.
We need a little bit of it, bud. We need a little. So, Fitzy, he coached, I want to say, probably 10 years in the ECHL as an assistant and a head coach. And I'd like to kind of get into, a little bit of your playing days. I mean, everyone that's playing the game now and has a chance to kind of meet and talk to someone at the highest level in their profession, obviously kind of want to know a little bit about, like, when you first started finding that passion for the game and kind of, what it was like growing up in Western Canada and, your transition into your pro playing days.
Well, for me, Reader, I can speak on my experience, but I always had the passion from the time I was probably 3 years old and knew what was going on the TV as far as watching Hockey Night in Canada and the expensive time you'd spend just playing ball hockey and wanting to get on the ice. And I always had that passion. It started at a young age. And we grew up in a small town in Western Canada, and we only had a town of 1,500. And we had no stoplights, one arena. And what we did is we would just come home from school. We would either play street hockey or we'd try and get what we called back then free ice, where we could go on the ice and just have fun. And it was a passion and something that you just always wanted to do with your buddies. And you didn't really realize that, hey, I'm pretty good at this, or maybe there's a chance, or of course every kid has a dream. They want to play at the highest level they can. But me personally, you never ever thought it would come to fruition until you were maybe, well into your teen years and people start coming to games and watching you play, and you see somebody with a major junior jacket on and think nothing of it, and your coach tells you after they were there to see you. And so up until my teens, I just played for fun. And it was, it's a lot different than it is now, Reader. Like, I'm sure obviously in your line of work and business you deal with and all these kids and parents and I think mine was different because I think I just wanted to play, and one day they kind of found me, and I made it to the major junior ranks, and then worked my way up to getting drafted, and then away I go. But it's definitely changed as far as it wasn't a business as it was back then. We didn't have the accessibility of trying to better ourselves all the time with like private teachers and stuff, which I wish we did, because we didn't have that. Because if we did, I probably would have ran my parents' bank account dry, because I wanted to get better, and everything and my passion, I was internally driven.
I think, one of the benefits, like, you might not have needed extra help. Like, growing up in a small town that revolves around hockey, like, in Messina, where I grew up, there was 6 or 7 rinks that were kept up by the town. You know what I mean? Where you could play. If you wanted to play, there was a place to skate. You know what I mean? But now, ice time's so expensive. And I like what you said about, I was the same way. Like, I played hockey very innocent. Like, there was no, as much as I wanted to play in the NHL, like, it never occurred to me that, like, in those steps that could happen. You know what I mean? It was, there wasn't like, there was a plan, but there wasn't a plan, if that makes sense. Where now everything's so calculated. It's, I'm going to play junior these 2 years and try to get into college and then, go on. And the reality of it is, until it becomes a business, which now I think happens at a younger age than it did for us. But like, the innocence of playing, I think for me, when I was about 16, 17, kind of gotten taken away with the business side of things, of like what you should be doing or where you should be going. But I think now, there's a ton more pressure on these kids to succeed every year. You know what I mean? Where with us, it was more self-driven, just to get better than if I don't do this, I'm not going to make it type of thing. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. I'm 100% agree with you. I love the word you said. We played innocently, because we did, although they were ultimately competitive. And you and I have known each other well for a lot of years, and you and I are very ultra competitive, and we had a lot of good games growing up as in the Fitzsimmons driveway. But the innocence was the beauty of it. Now as a pro scout, I'll get cornered by a parent in in an airport or in a hotel fitness center or something, and I love it because I love the passion by their parents. But they'll be telling me about their son who plays Pee Wee AAA hockey, and he's playing over in the rink on the north side of Toronto, and can you come watch him, or what does he have to do? And I love the passion, because as a parent of a 14-year-old son, you always want the best for your kids, I think. And my best advice for them, and even kids and that want to make it to the highest level, and what do I have to do? And I just say, just keep loving the game and keep working at it and practice and learn your trade, and you will get found. You will get found. The good ones always get found, and especially in today's day and age with here we are talking, thousands of miles apart here on a Zoom call. We're going to find you. And, and I don't feel you always have to play on, the best travel team and you have to spend the best money to have the best jerseys. I'm a big believer, go out and have fun, play as best you can, and you're going to get found. And, and that's kind of going back to my story. I was playing in a small town, and next thing I know, I was at a rink and a guy comes next to me and said to me, "What team are you with?" And I said, "Well, it was before the game." And he asked me, I said, "I'm with the Lumsden Lions." This was the defining moment where I knew, what, I might be an okay hockey player. I was 15 years old. And he goes, "Oh, you're with the Lumsden Lions. Your goaltender, Jason Fitzsimmons." And I kind of looked at this mountain of a man. I go, "Yeah, that's me, sir." And he goes, "Well, my name is Lord Mulliken. We just listed you with the Weyburn Red Wings." And I remember from that moment on, going back to get dressed for the game that day, and I'm thinking, wow, that just happened like that, and I had no clue. So from there, it just kind of morphed into Western Hockey League and drafted and so on. But that was the defining moment. It wasn't until I was 15 years old that I knew, I might be okay at this sport. And away we went. And unfortunately, my playing career after 6 years pro got cut short because of back injuries. But I always wanted to just be the best player I can at whatever I'm doing. If I'm in the Western Hockey League, or if I'm in the American League, or if I'm in the ECHL, I just want to do the best every time. And I never made it to the point where I was a full-time NHL player. I got drafted by Vancouver, went up in the playoffs a couple times as a third goalie, but never played full-time. And you know what? I don't have any regrets about it one little bit, Reader, because I know every game I approached that it was my game 7. And you didn't play well all the time, and everybody has a story, well, how they maybe didn't make it, and I don't. I mean, I tried my hardest and it didn't work. I was lucky enough to stay into pro hockey. When I blew my back out, we had a head coach, Rick Vive, and at the time he had told me that he wanted to honor the last year of my contract, and he was going to move on to the Calgary Flames farm team, and asked if I would be the assistant. So I kind of really, really lucked out into that, because at 26 years old, my plan at the time was to play until they told me I can't play anymore because I was too old. But so I got into coaching at 26 years old in pro hockey, and that doesn't happen nowadays. I look back now, and I'm very fortunate that happened that way. I worked with a guy named Rick Aduno who helped teach me, and then when he moved on, I became the head coach and general manager, and hired Jared Bednar, who's now with Colorado Avalanche. And so I was lucky enough to do that for 9 years, and same sort of thing happened with Washington. In 2002, we became the ECHL affiliate of the Washington Capitals through relationships, and that's crazy how it works too. George McPhee and Glenn Hanlon were with the Vancouver Canucks when they drafted me. So I'd spent 3 years under an NHL entry-level deal with them, and got to know them really well. And they moved on to Washington. And at that time when I was coaching, we reconnected, and that's how we formed the affiliation between Washington and South Carolina. And I remember that day distinctly, Jared Bednar and I talking to Glenn Hanlon, and he said, a guy named Brian McClellan is going to call you as soon as we hang up, and he's going to be your main point of contact with the affiliation. So I waited for Brian to call, and anyone in the DC area, or anyone probably obviously knows that Brian's now the GM of the Washington Capitals, but at the time he was the director of player personnel. And we had an initial conversation for about a half hour where we talked about players, and we just seemed to really like connect on many levels when it came to hockey. And I remember hanging up with him going, geez, that was great, and then we called the next day and talked again for another half hour, talked about guys, Derek Englund, Rich Peverly, guys like that. And so from that, when in 2007, they had asked me if I wanted to come on their pro staff as a pro scout with the Capitals. And that was the point in my career where I was kind of 9 years into coaching, and I was unsure if I really wanted to do it much longer. I'd come to a crossroads in my life when it came to coaching, and I know everyone has it in different aspects of their life, but I mean, that call just came at the perfect time, and I had the opportunity to get into scouting, and I just quick knee jerk, absolutely, I want to do it. And so we laugh about it now, but I got hired on October 4th of that 2007, and on October 5th, I was on a plane to Rochester. I went to 2 games in Rochester to watch the Americans, then drove down to Binghamton to watch the Ottawa's farm team. And I remember Brian McClellan calling me on the drive from Rochester to Binghamton, asking me how everything went up in Rochester. And I said, it went great. I know the players inside out. Who do you want to talk about? Let's discuss. And he said, okay, great. Well, then after the game in Binghamton, fly home and check in with your family. I said, okay, great. Sounds great, Brian. I said, one more question. I said, how much am I getting paid for this job? So the irony behind it is I was just so excited and so fortunate to get the opportunity to work with the National Hockey League team that it wasn't money driven at all. It was just opportunity and a goal of mine to try and, work at that level. And that was on October 5th, 2007. And here we are, getting ready for another season. I guess we're getting ready for the playoffs here, but it's just crazy how the world works. And I'm fortunate to be with these guys and work with a great organization with the Capitals, from Brian McClellan down to, everybody in the organization, stick boys, equipment managers. It's class. Ownership, treat us tremendous. The group of scouts that we work with, I've only worked for one team, and I can guarantee you this, that no team would have this much fun together as a group. And so very lucky to be where I am today.
That's amazing. And one thing you mentioned along the way, and I talked to Derek Lalonde with the Lightning a little bit earlier, and he kind of mentioned the same thing, is like developing those relationships along the way. And hockey has a lot to do with everything, right? Like he had mentioned, and a lot of the coaches before, coaches like you and Bedsy and he came along, were my way or the highway, kind of in it for themselves type of thing, and not having that much of like relationships with the players. And I think to go from being a coach to an NHL scout, one, you have to know like what you're doing, right? Like they're going to bring in someone like in the ECHL, you had developed so many of those good relationships with players. And you mentioned Rich Peverly, who played in the East Coast League and ended up winning a cup with Boston. Like those types of players kind of got overlooked a little bit back in the day. Like people weren't looking at the coast as like a developmental league. They almost looked at it as a, easy to come, hard to leave, the ECHL, where nowadays, I mean, I might be wrong, but I think they're using that league a lot more for that than they used to. And you can see it, especially in Washington. I mean, I live in Maryland now, and the success of the Caps directly affects minor hockey numbers here. Like the numbers are crazy. in Maryland now because of the Caps' success. And, you know, you attribute to that, like they've done a lot in the last 15 years to kind of make sure they're that organization that's top of the league. You mentioned, you know, how much you guys get along. One of my questions would be, one, as a scout, like, do you guys have, you know, different scouts looking at different leagues, different age groups? How many scouts about do you guys have on your, you know, on your staff, and kind of what their responsibilities are?
Well, first off, just building on your last comment, one of the things that we take pride in Washington is development. And, you know, so we have a great development staff, you know, Steve Richmond, Ole Kolzig, Brooks Orpik, and developing players is key because ultimately in today's salary cap base, you have to promote from within and build your players from within. So we think it's really important to have a three-tiered system. And by three-tiered, I mean we have the Washington Capitals, the Hershey Bears, and the South Carolina Stingrays. And I feel, and it was actually validated one time on the XM radio, they asked who does it best in a three-tiered system. And it was without question, it's the Washington Capitals and Toronto Maple Leafs is what the reporter said on the radio. And I took great pride in that because, you know, from where the ECHL's come a long way in the last, you know, 15, 20 years. And, you know, to see players that move on from the ECHL to the AHL, and it's viewed a lot differently than it was. And, you know, with us affiliating with Charleston and the South Carolina Stingrays, we feel we have the premier affiliate in the ECHL and then the Hershey Bears in the AHL, which helps the development process because, you know, there's a lot of times when players get sent down. Like every player wants to play in the NHL, but when they get sent down and they go to Hershey, there's a transition period, you know, that they're disappointed because they didn't make the Washington Capitals. And I don't want to call it I feel sorry for myself stage or pouting stage, but, you know, the nice thing is it's a great city with a great building and great fans. And the same thing goes down another tier when we get shipped down to South Carolina. They don't want to be here. But then when you get here and realize, wow, what a tremendous place this is, it helps ease the pain a little bit. So now getting on to your question. So we have, on our staff, we have about 25 scouts that really head up everything from the amateur side, the professional side over in North America to over in Europe, amateur scouts and pro scouts over in Europe. And, you know, there's kind of two divisions. There's the amateur side and the professional side. You know, on the professional side, we have a group of us that consists of, you know, player personnels, pro scouts, GMs, assistant GMs, guys like Matt Bradley, Brian Sotheby, Chris Patrick, guys that are I think, pretty common names up in the Maryland area and the DC area with that you associate with the Capitals. And for me, on the pro side, speaking first, our group of guys, it's like, you know, you talk about just having fun and working hard together. And, you know, we have our moments where we'll get heated up, where we're debating over a player and whatnot, but at the same time, we all have tremendous respect for one another. And when we get, you know, locked into a room and we have to come out during free agency or trade deadline, it's fun, you know. And if you can say that about your job, and, you know, it's hard, but it's fun and you like working with the people, I think that's, you know, you're ahead of the game right there. So that we head up the pro side, that group of guys. And the amateur side, our assistant GM, Ross Mahoney, is, I like to call him a black belt when it comes to the NHL draft. He's been doing it for so many years. And so he heads up the amateur side. And I think his track record speaks for itself. You know, the players he's drafted that have gone on to the NHL. And on his side, he looks after a lot of guys in the amateur scouting staff over in Europe, seeing, you know, 250, 300 games live a year. So him himself and his staff. So that's what our staff is made up of. And then obviously there's a whole other department in today's day and age with the analytics side. And we have a group of guys that take care of that. And they have a lot of input in the game. I mean, the game has changed in the last 10 years where, you know, it's not just what your opinion is. Like, the numbers have to support it. If your opinion says what the numbers say, you're probably barking up the right tree.
Has there been like a point, where, you went into a room kind of believing in a player that maybe the group didn't, where that player ended up doing really well, or, like maybe a diamond in the rough that, you saw that had some success along the way?
Well, you have guys that, as far as a specific, like me banging the table and in a meeting, no, but like the group that we have on the pro side, what's neat about it too, it's not a dictatorship. Yeah, Brian McClellan's the boss and he's the hammer and what he says goes, but his way of managing us is really, really interesting because everybody's got a voice and he goes around the room and he'll talk about a player, he'll bring a player up, and then everybody will have their input or have their opinion on him. And you'll have like a real healthy, debate about the player. And then when all else fails, we'll look towards the numbers, what the analytics show. And then we'll all maybe pull them up on video and we'll all watch, in the meeting room about the player. And we'll come up with the decision. But, as more specifically about your question, you'll always see a guy, like say you're in Austin, Texas, and you're watching this player and, you kind of cheer for him sometimes because there was a soft spot that you had for him that you're like, man, this guy's going to make it at some point. He's 26 years old already. He's come a long way from like college to the ECHL to the CHL, but he works hard every shift. And me as a scout, I mean, obviously you have to be a smart player to play the game. You got to be incredibly skilled. But for me, the two things that jump out at me when I'm watching a player is, number one is his skating and his compete level. And if a guy's a good skater, you're going to get noticed instantly. And then the compete level for me is another thing. Like if I check both those boxes and that guy is fills those voids, and then you watch him closer. But those guys always jump out at me because skating is something you can always work on, and the compete level is something you control. There's a lot of things and a lot of intangibles in the game that you can't control, from the weather, the fans, the bus ride there or whatever, but you can always control how you compete. And that was one of your strengths as a player, and what brought it to my attention back when I was coaching and recruited you or traded for you or signed you in the summer. You never took a shift off. And those guys find ways, and I have a soft spot for players like that because they're hard to play against. And, you take the will over skill, which was something Barry Trotz always pounded into us. You want guys that want to work hard. And so those are things that catch my eye. So those guys that, to answer your long, short answer is I do cheer for guys that I've liked in the past and you do want to make. Maybe they wouldn't be impact players for Washington Capitals at that time.
So there's obviously every player, experiences different situations in their career. One thing you said that I took pride in as a player was not taking a shift off. So the difference I think some of these kids don't get now is you can be that player that can skate and not take a shift off, but have enough baggage that you're not going to make it in the top league. You know what I mean? Like now it's to the point, like it's almost like when a college recruits a player, if you're going to spend millions of dollars on a player, like you're going to do your research on their personality, how they are as a teammate, kind of how that, translates over. I guess what I was trying to get at is like, do you find now like it's so competitive with skill levels that the little intangibles might be the difference makers in making it and not?
Well, without a doubt. And, my advice to young players, especially now that are trying to get to college, trying to get to pro, trying to get drafted, be careful. Like right nowadays, people can pull up everything you do, everything you say, everything. Once you hit send on your tweet or that's with you forever. And, when we're recruiting a guy, drafting a guy, trading for a guy, free agent signing a guy, we're doing all our homework and we're trying to figure out everything about this guy. And everything from maybe talking to billets, talking to other players that played with him, reading his Facebook page or just whatever. I mean, You do whatever because you want to make sure when you bring them into your program, you know, whether it's the South Carolina Stingrays or our program in Washington or Hershey, that you've done your homework because it looks really bad on you if not. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum for the player, that can wreck you. You know, like you got to be really, really careful. And you know, when we go through our draft, and like I said, Ross heads that up. They'll put a list together of like, you know, well over 200 players that are potential draft picks, and they'll go through every one of those players and do their background check on them. And you know, they'll skip over a player even if he's ranked pretty high because of his pure skill and talent, because there's red flags. So, you know, my advice is you're always being watched, you know, and especially in today's day and age, you really got to be careful. And, you know, that being said, I also believe in second chances, but not thirds. And, you know, so you just mind your P's and Q's and work hard. And, you know, you're going to make it if you've got the drive and the skill and the compete.
There's always a window. I think some people don't realize it might take a little longer for others, you know, to get where they want to go. You got to have some sort of belief in like the hockey gods, right? Like it might not happen right away, but if you keep doing the right things, I'm a true believer it's going to pay off. And it might be later than what you want, but you have to kind of follow that and like be patient in the process, right?
You know what? Like, you nailed it on the head. And that's not just hockey, Reader. That's every walk of life. Like, you're going to have highs and lows and ups and downs. And you got to stay with it. If that is your goal and your plan and that's where you want to be. And that's when you talk about the guys you cheer for, it's guys like that, you know, like Bracken Kearns, Rick Nickel, like guys that will find their way in the NHL in their late 20s, early 30s, because they're playing for that reason. And, yeah, it's just not a hockey lesson. It's anything in life. You know, sometimes it takes people a little longer. Like, you know, you see guys go through the draft nowadays, and just because they don't get drafted, that's not the end of the road. If anything, that's just incentive. That should give you motivation because, well, I've got to get better, or I've got to work on this, or I've got to, you know, and you know, there's some, even you go guys like, you look at like the Jamie Benns of the world, like those guys were drafted later in the draft. Pavel Bure was a 6th round pick. Like, you know, these guys, you know, I think it just kind of, if anything, it can motivate you to get better. And you can, maybe your weaknesses are magnified a little bit and they work harder.
Yeah, well, that's a really good point too. I mean, you know, it happens at different stages for every player. I mean, as a pro scout, I mean, primarily you watch pro players, right? Like that's.
Yeah. Really, so I'll watch all 3 of the major pro leagues with NHL, AHL, ECHL. And obviously there's a lot of players. There's roughly, you know, 700 in each league. So, you know, that's why we have an abundance of scouts where, you know, a lot of it too isn't always, back to one of your other questions, isn't always checking out goals and assists and penalty minutes. It's finding out information about the players. And we talked about how we do it, whether it's trainers, billets, and, you know, you want to make sure when you're bringing or putting, you know, your stamp or signing a guy to your organization that you're bringing in the right person, because culture and you know, character, they can win you championships. And you know, if you bring in something that disrupts the culture in the locker room, it can really hurt. So yeah, that's gathering information is part of our job as well as watching the players.
Speaking of championships, got a really nice picture I posted of you up with the cup right in front of Ovechkin. Kind of walk us through that season. I mean, you guys have been putting in a ton of work to build towards that and to actually, you know, have it happen. What's it like as a scout, you know, to be a part of that, to step on the ice and hoist the cup with the boys and, you know, kind of walk us through that? There's not too many people you can ask this question to, you know?
Yeah, so that was, you know, the actual moment was something that at that point in my life I'd been chasing for 46 years to have that moment where for the first time you got to raise it over your head. So it was real surreal, and you know, it was one of your goals that you've reached. But like the beauty of that is it felt so incredible, Reader, is you want to do it every year now. And that's the best part about it too, because, sometimes when you reach one of your goals, you got to reset it and you got to go get it again. And I think, obviously my role was a lot minor comparatively to the Holpies and Ovechkin and guys like that to play the game. But I'd like to think I was a part of it. And that was, and then to see your name engraved on the Stanley Cup is a memory, or your family name, I should say, is a memory that I'll never, ever, ever, ever forget. And it'll be around forever. So that's neat. But, to get to that moment, there was a lot of things that had to go right, not only in that year, but I always go back to, once again, when Brian McCullum took over. I mean, this guy's got a plan, and we talked about culture and trying to cultivate what it takes to win. We just didn't win it in 2018. It started years prior, and getting in there and getting the right guys. I remember him coming in his first year of free agency and said, we got to get better on defense. And he circled Brooks Orpik and Matt Niskanen. And he goes, I want these guys. And we all put our 2 cents in and on the player. And Brian went out and got it. The next year, we had to get better on the right side, top 6 right wing. That was his plan. So we went out and got TJ Oshie and Justin Williams. The next year, it's third line center. We got Lars Eller. And, he's a very calculated man that has a plan. And we all have his back. And so all those little things built into that moment, that June night in Las Vegas when we won it. And, to see the game plan come through and everybody's dream come true on that night, it was just a memory I'll never forget.
Yeah, it's surreal. And, I've seen, tons of the pictures. Of course, you brought it to Charleston, have the boys with the Stingrays, get to hang out with the trophy. It's directly involved with them, right? It's the same organization. I thought it was really cool, when you got to bring that back. So like Ovi's, celebrations after the Cup were pretty well documented. Like, did you get involved? Were you in the parade and everything when they were swimming through the fountains and stuff? Or?
Well, we were lucky enough to get asked to go in the parade. So I took my family, my son and my wife, and we rode on a float with Brett Conley and John Carlson and Andre Barakowski. So we had fun. And then as far as the fountain swimming and whatnot, as a staff, we all went up to Dick Patrick's house right after the parade. And we wrestled I shouldn't say we, I think Dick and Ted just told them, but we took the Stanley Cup up to Dick's house for about 4 hours and had a staff party with it. And, we got to leave the partying to the players as far as swimming in fountains and whatnot. But we definitely had fun with it. We had a lot of fun. And like I said, the group of guys that we got to share with from the staff made it extremely fun. But I love what Ovi and the guys did. And you know what? They did it with the city. And that city deserved it. Like, don't kid yourself. They've had some rough years in a few other sports. And then to see the Caps and we win it that night and then just celebrate with the city, I think it just brought even more pleasure to winning it that year. And then to see the Nats do it, the next year, it was incredible. And, hopefully the Redskins we can get the trifecta and the Wizards, the Mystics. And we've seen to grow a great winning tradition in that city with all the teams that have been doing it. So it's fun to be part of it. And it's, like I said, it's an honor for sure.
Yeah. So it's got to be tough. I know, you're a big family man, and you and I have talked about it a lot. Like you had lost your father at a young age. And I know when I started playing for you down there, like my dad just wanted to be around. And I always, I thought one of your best qualities was just like how personable you were and how much you actually cared. And I think, was that, like, that had to be a big moment when you said, put not your name, but the Fitzsimmons name on the trophy and not having him there. That must have been, in the back of your mind of like, is he watching down? Is he proud? I was thinking about that when I saw you with it.
For sure. That's something that'll be on there forever. And, he was. And than to come home and share with your family. I remember I got up the next morning, and our night was pretty tame in Vegas, contrary to all belief. But we sat around the hotel and had a team function that the ownership group had put on, and then I was out the next morning at 6:30, and I flew home. I remember getting home, and your son and your family and just neighbors. It was just such a great feeling. And talking about the name on the cup, I mean, that for me is the honor that is the best, because they had to leave some people's names off, and I didn't know, and wasn't sure. And then I remember we opened up against Boston the next year on, I think, October 4th, and we were coming in for a ring ceremony and the unveiling of the names on the cup. And I remember I was outside shooting baskets with my son and my wife, and I came in, I had about 10 missed texts, and I'm like, oh my God, these are from my work. Something's going on, Chantel, I've got to take these. And it was just pictures of the Stanley Cup with your name on it, and just pure emotion. And
wow.
So that was really cool. And it's I think the actual ring will stay on there for, I think the guy told me 65 years, and then it'll go into the Hall of Fame. So at least for the rest of my life, I think the name should be on the cup, and then it'll go into the Hall of Fame. But like I said, Reader, I mean, it's not about me, but it's just nice to be part of it. Like, we have it takes a lot of people on a lot of different levels to reach that ultimate goal. And it takes some luck and some bounces and some good health along the way too. So it was a pretty magical season by the Caps, and our coaches, everyone did a tremendous job. So this year coming up here, we're coming out of this pause on July 10th, going into phase 3, and our goal is to win. Like, we aren't coming out of here to get second place. We want to do it again. So and I know our guys will be well rested and well fired up, and I think you got to learn to win, and these guys they know what it takes and the commitment it takes. So I like our chances going into it here this July and August, September.
Yeah, it's amazing living here, just how much of an impact like what the Capitals are doing affects the city. And it's having been to maybe 10 or 15 games in the last couple of years, like, you get sold out crowds like on a Tuesday night. Like, they want good hockey, and the team you guys have put together, especially like what you said, after winning, then not winning and still having the same core players, like, they know what it's going to take to kind of get through this. I mean, that's got to give you guys a little bit of an upper hand, kind of going back in after a little break, is all the veteran players and having that success. Like, they know it's right there. Like, it's very attainable again.
Well, and unfortunately, Father Time, guys are getting older, and I think a lot of them could realize, like, we're running out of opportunities, with this group of guys. So, how it is to be in that locker room, and you care a lot about that person sitting across from you and beside you. And, you might be a younger guy like Jacob Brana, and it might be enough to drive you because you want to win it for the older guys, or whatever motivates you. I mean, everybody gets motivated a little bit differently. And as far as your comment about the attendance and a lot of that is like the day we drafted Alex Ovechkin, like, it just seemed to almost turn the franchise around. And, he's been incredible for hockey in that area, and very Gretzky-esque is in the sense of what he did to hockey in California. And, to see the crowd, I think, I don't know the exact number, but the continuous amount of sellouts is just tremendous. And the fan support and that city was just electric, going in those playoff games and celebrations they would have in the street. And, like, it was so much fun to be part of. And, I just, the Caps have had some trying years, from their inaugural year in the mid 70s to, the horrible starts. And I think that town's been starving for winners. And in the last few years, they've been getting them. And I'm happy for the people of it and the people in the DC area.
Yeah, they're very appreciative. I definitely can tell that. And it's crazy to think, like, you know, you got that vibe with the Capitals. Go to a Hershey game. It's the same thing. Like they're sold out. They love their team. Same in Charleston. Like there's a reason you used to live in Charleston. There's a reason I lived there for 15 years. I mean, and I guess that's kind of one more thing I wanted to get into quick before we ended is, you know, having known you for so long and seen what you've done, like a lot has to go out to, you know, your wife and family. I mean, it's not the easiest job. Like you're pretty much 365, you know, and
Yeah.
having to travel a ton, but making that home base in Charleston with all your friends and ex-teammates, I mean, that's just something really cool that you get to do. But that means you have to go, you know, elsewhere to do your job quite a bit too.
Yeah, it's for sure a tedious and demanding job at times, but I mean, you know, I think we touched on it earlier. I love what I'm doing. So, you know, the nice thing that is the supporting cast of my wife and my son, like they've allowed me to live out my dream and they've come with me for the ride. And I think they would tell you it's been a pretty good one, but I'll leave that for another interview. Maybe if you do the wife of a hockey player, they may have a different side of the story. But you know, my wife and I met in grade 8 art class, and we've been together ever since. So you know, she's been a huge part of our success as a family, and then getting to share it with your son at 14. He's just starting to come into that age now where he's really getting what dad does, and I think he kind of realizes it's probably a pretty cool job. And he makes some road trips with me, and even though he's a baseball player and a darn good one, it's you know, that's 100% fine with me. I mean, we've been fortunate enough to call Charleston home base. The rest of our family lives up in Western Canada in a farming community outside of Regina, and we get back up there to visit. But we're so lucky to be down here, and like yourself, I mean, you called this home for what, over 10, 12, 13 years at least, probably by time.
Still do. I mean, my wife's from there. You know, we say, when are we going home? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've been here for 2 years. I love it here, but yeah, Charleston's still got that, you know, special part. I mean, it's very rare you get a city. I mean, Charleston's beautiful and all, but most people that play hockey go back to where they came from when they're done. You know what I mean? Like they go back to their hometowns, and Charleston's kind of been that exception of there's 30, 40 ex-Stingrays down there that are living there, you know, raising their kids there. And I don't know, had a big impact on my career, definitely on your career. I just think it's neat that you get to do it out of there, right? Like you still have your family there, you know, you got all your friends there, and you get to come back to it. And I think that's the most rewarding kind of part about it, you know?
Well, with, you know, like I love the part you said, and I'd love to do like a census and find out exactly how many, you know, ex-players are living here now. It's got to be north of 40, I would think. And you know, just whether the people, restaurants, golf, like there's so many options. And, you know, yeah, home is always Saskatchewan, and it's always great to go home. But this is where we live now. And no matter where this game takes us, or life takes us for that matter, we'll always keep a house or, you know, something down here and always be back here because, you know, from my family standpoint, you know, I'm gone all winter, you know, trying to find players and scout. And when you do come home, you're coming home in maybe February to 75-degree weather. And if you have a day off, you can go to the range and hit some balls, or take your son to the ball diamond. So you kind of recharge your batteries as opposed to living out in Western Canada. Your day off would probably consist of shoveling snow and trying to get out of the house and put the chains on the tires to, you know, make sure your car can get into town. But, you know, so with me being able to travel and gone all the time, my wife and my son are here. I know they're safe with all our alumni. We have a real family-like alumni in the sense where everybody cares for one another. And so I feel that she's fortunate to be here with good people. And, you know, you talk about the Robbie Kincannons and Brett Mariettis and Jared Bednars. Like, we all keep in touch and probably text every 2 or 3 days. You know, Dan Fornell, another one. Like, it's just, this is our chosen family, I guess you'd say. And, you know, we'd all do anything for any one of us.
Yeah. It's crazy throughout, you know, your experience playing, how tight you stay with ex-players and friends, even if you don't see them for 10 or 15 years, like it's like you never missed a beat, you know?
Well, I think a lot of it, though, too, Reader, is, you know, it's the character. It goes back to the culture and the players that were recruited to come play here. You know, they're high character people. And part two of it, too, is this organization's won, and they've won a few times and been to the finals a couple other. And the old cliche about, you know, you win together, you walk together forever. And I think a lot of those guys still have the bonds because of them winning together. And it doesn't matter if it's an ECHL championship or an NHL championship. There's still huge commitments, and everybody from family to players to coaches to fans have to do to get to that level. So I think that's a lot of the reason why everyone is so close down here.
Yeah, no, I completely agree that the champions walk together forever is, you know, something we used at Clarkson, something I continue to use to this day. I did have a question from Tommy Taylor. Tommy Taylor wanted me to ask you if you're more consistent with a pitching wedge or a water bottle.
Well, he's probably. I don't want to dismiss the fan mail, but tell Tommy he's seen my pitching wedge, and I think he knows the answer. He's seen my water bottle throwing too. And, no, I made a mistake.
Tell that real quick. That was one of my all-time favorite moments as a player. Was it Koharski, the younger Koharski? Was the
yeah, it was Jamie Koharski, and that was one of my least proudest moments as a coach. The emotion got you.
As a player, we knew that you had our backs, and none of us looked at that as anything embarrassing. Fitzy threw a water bottle at a ref. Actually, not a water bottle, but a bottle of water. And he ended up getting suspended for maybe a couple of games. But I thought the funniest part was the boosters in Charleston, instead of taking it serious, made up water bottles with a picture of you on it, getting money to raise for your fine. And I think they raised maybe double or triple whatever the fine was from the league, free Fitzy. But just
wow.
So to this,
Let me defend myself to if there are any young coaches out there watching this, but I'm an ultimate competitive guy, and I didn't like the way the calls were going, and I just went to throw the water bottle in the air in disgust. But anyone that's taken grade 9 science and knows a little bit about centrifugal force, and when a water bottle is only half full, when you throw it a certain direction, it doesn't always go in that direction. It seems to curve. So about halfway through the throw, I realized, you know what? This is going to be pretty close to hitting this guy. And sure enough, I got him. And I got suspended for a long time, and I got fined a lot. And the people at Charleston turned a real negative situation into a positive. And I definitely would. I regret doing it. It's a funny story to tell, but you sure learned.
I didn't mention that story to embarrass you. I mentioned it because as a player, we all felt the same way, and we were like, you know what, this guy's got our back. You know what I mean? We loved it.
Well, I'm going to tell you one thing. I wasn't a great coach. I was a good manager of people, I felt, and I knew what it took to bring the right people in here, and I hired a great assistant coach in Jared Bednar, and he, you know, if the truth be told and the onion be peeled right now, he coached the team and I managed the team, and it's good to see that we've both gone on and had success. But from a pure X and O standpoint, I was more of I try to lead with emotion, sometimes too much, but ultimately I was a young kid thrown in the fire and had to learn on the go, and you make some mistakes along the way.
I think you're selling yourself a little bit short, Fitzy, and we've never talked about this, and I never even thought you thought like this, but you know, as much as what, you know, Betsy's doing and everything, you were the glue, you know what I mean? We played for you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, it's
there's not a guy that played for you that would say that, and I think that's a lesson on everybody is, we're always harder on ourselves than anyone else will ever be on you. And in you included, I think you hold yourself to a very high, you know, point that we're never going to satisfy what we think we should be doing. You know what I mean? But on the outside looking in, like Fitz, you got tons of ex players that look up to you and definitely are more than proud of what you're doing. Like I never cheered for the Capitals or the Avalanche, but now since you guys are there, it's like that's you want to see your friends do well, especially guys deserving of it. You know what I mean? But no, there was you can say that all you want, but you motivated a lot of guys during your coaching career. Me being one of them. And yeah, we love playing for you every second.
Well, I appreciate that. I think in the Stinger organization, they've done a good job with coaches and promoting them along the way. After, Rick Vig went on to the next level, myself in a different role at the next level, then Jared Bednar, then Cale McLean, then Spencer Carberry, Ryan Warsawski, this coach that we have now in our system, Steve Bergen, he could be the best one yet here if he stays on the right trajectories. So, it's another thing about that I'm proud of this organization is, we all try and bring in quality people that, and it's paid off for everybody. So thank you for the nice compliments. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I think the community in Charleston, I mean, the guys that stay aren't what's wrong with the game. Like these guys are they're doing really good things in town. They've got still a great following. I mean, when you go into a Stingray game, you're probably getting mauled, the whole time. Not mauled, but fans wanting to show you their appreciation. And I think it's just it's one of those special places in hockey that, unless you play there, you don't really get it. But, there's a somewhat of a fraternity that comes through those doors. And, once you're there, you're a part of it. And, it's up to you to keep it going. But it's produced so many good players and coaches. Like you just named off 4 coaches that are, currently doing amazing things. And then there's been tons of players that have left the organization to do some really, really good things too. But yeah, the ownership group in Charleston, I think, kind of sets the bar pretty high for what you would expect from a ECHL organization. And they've done so much for so many people, even in the change of hands. But yeah, a lot of guys have come out of there with success and gone on to do some really, really great things.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head too. You said ownership group sets the bar high. And that's the same with the Zuckers. Obviously did it for 20 plus years, and Todd Halloran now is taking over the reins there. Like Ted Leonsis, you talk about setting the bar high. This guy's like, you work extra hard in fear of you don't want to let the guy down. Him and Dick Patrick and the care they've taken with my family and the rest of our scouts with the Washington Capitals, like. That's, you talk about motivation, like those guys motivate you in a positive way. And, and it starts out at every level, leaders at the top of every job, not just sports reader, like you lead by example and the people will follow suit below them. And I think that's just a great point you hit there.
Yeah. And lead by examples, one of those things that's been a cliche since I can remember, but now more than ever, like it's the most important way to do it. Like I tell my kids, I'm asking them to do things I didn't do, but I'm being honest with them about it. Like I want this for you more than I would have wanted it for me. You know what I mean? And the game has changed and there's so many guys like yourself that, even just taking the time out to do this, it'll go a long way with some kids. And I think they need to hear how people, attain their goals in different ways and the fact that it's never easy. But if you want to get to where you want to go, like you're going to have to go through some shit. Like it's going to be a rough ride and that self-confidence and belief in you're doing the right thing. It's so important now to keep us kind of going in what we're doing.
Well, Reader, nothing great in life ever came easy. And the harder you work for something, the more pleasure it's going to have when you reach there. And, it sounds like you talk about the most successful people in life have failed multiple times before they got to where they want to be. You know, when you relate it to hockey, there's a lot of teams that have lost Stanley Cup finals before they learned to win. You know, Babe Ruth leads in strikeouts and home runs. Like, it's not going to be great all the time. You just got to keep on going to it. And it's something funny I've never brought up, but even when I started playing pro hockey, I had a little NHL badge that came off a shirt, you know, from, I don't remember where I got it from. I found it in the locker room one time. And I carried that in my wallet for, 20 years. I mean, it was always stuffed in my wallet. I remember Nate Kaiser one time found it when we were on the bus, and he's like, "What's this all about?" I just, brushed under the rug. I just found it. But you always got to believe in yourself, and if you don't believe in yourself, you're not going to probably obtain the goal you want to obtain. So, it's set the bar high, high, and it's something like, I'm not trying to sound like Anthony Robbins or some motivator, but it's things I believe. I'm a positive person.
Anyone that gets to, that level has to have that self-belief, or it doesn't work, And speaking of Kaiser, that's the last person you want to have find that. We'll call you out on an outfit. I miss that camaraderie, that we had in the locker room. Like, that's the thing I think you get out of the game. Like, I don't miss practice, not one bit. But like the bus rides and, hanging out with the boys after you just accomplished something bigger than you, like, that's just stuff that's hard to replace, right? Like, we just by doing this, helps me not miss that as much, if that makes sense,
Well, that's the part that I missed the most when I was forced into retirement with the injury, is just being around in the room, kind of the jabbing and the going back and forth, and you got to have thick skin, and if you don't, and this is great for anyone listening that's maybe coming up with it. Like, I was told one time, if they make fun of you, it's probably because they like you. Obviously there's a fine line, but and you got to have thick skin. And if people, the older guys in the team, when you're a young kid, realize that you're taking this personal, and you're because they may make fun of my hair or my bow-legged or my pork glove save or whatever. If you take it personal, they're going to get on you even more. So that's what team sports does. And I said all along, I don't care what sport, if it's hockey, football, baseball. All I said is I want him to play a team sport, because to be part of a team and to be all pulling on the rope, and then to see it ultimately happen at the end, it's so rewarding. And it's just something, like, you look in life after hockey and going into businesses, all these businesses want people that had success in sports that know what it's like to be with a team. Because if it's worked on the ice or on the ball diamond or the full field, it's usually going to translate into working environment outside of hockey. So I think I'll leave it on this. I think people always want winners, whether it's on your hockey team or running your business. So set your goals high, work hard, and you never know.
I couldn't agree with you more on that. I think you add in patience as a virtue, and with all those other traits, like, good things are going to happen. It's just a matter of time. Like, even with me, like, I just interviewed Lalonde a little earlier, and I said, like, if someone said to you, when you were 16, you were going to be a NHL pro coach, what would you say? And I kind of thought about that in my rhetoric. Like, if you, said at 42, you're going to be coaching 15-year-olds, what would you say? I kind of would have laughed, like, I would have thought I was destined for way bigger, greater things. At the same time, with everything I've been through, it's probably the first time in my life I realize this is where I'm supposed to be. Well, it's a circle, and like, the end all isn't always what you're dreaming of as a kid. You know what I mean? It might be in the same realm, but it's something you have to be passionate about, or it's just not worth it.
Well, Reid, I think it's a great time to tell you, and I apologize if I haven't told you in the past, but I'm proud, extremely proud of where you are today. I don't know if, I don't know. I know your story, and I know the work you put in, and we did all our homework when we were recruiting you, and you were a tremendous player three-time All-Star for our team, and where you are today, and you look completely healthy, you look happy, and that for me that's the sign of a lot of success. So I'm happy for you, and I wish you the best of luck moving forward here with the program up in the area there.
Well, I appreciate it, buddy. And, it was a risk for you guys to take me back then. I knew I had a ton of talent, but before then, like I had, mentally I was a midget, and getting that opportunity to kind of come into Charleston and prove myself, it was a big impact on that belief in me. And, granted, I wish it would have, for me, just stayed up, but that wasn't what was meant at the time. I had to put myself through a little more bullshit before I figured it out. But that's the crazy thing. Like, you can get so many different breaks and chances in this game and life, but it's really what you do with them. You know what I mean? And until you're ready to do it, it's just going to be another step along the way. But no, I think, this game it's saved me from depression, from, just regretting choices, looking back and getting bitter. Now it's like, fuck, what can I do to make sure someone else doesn't have to go through this? You know what I mean?
I love it. That's giving back. Like, that's, people learn from our mistakes, and, it's, you said something earlier too, is like, you're telling your players, you're teaching your players, you want it sometimes more than the players. And I love that passion, that drive that and the players, they're going to recognize it at one point and be like, wow, this guy, he A, knows what he's doing, and B, he wants it for us. And I think that's a sign of a leader right there.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people just need someone to believe in them a little bit. When you get that push from someone, you don't realize at the time maybe, but that could be the difference in someone's life, in their career, making a turning point. Hopefully, along the road, we'll hear some good stories about, how that happened. But until then, it's just, it kind of saves me just talking about it a little bit. You know what I mean?
Well, it just reminded me of, like, so we have a guy that worked for us, a guy named Larry Carrier, and now he's the assistant GM for Montreal Canadiens, or one of them. And he was working with Buffalo at the time, and this is just advice that he'd given me. It was in 2001. Might have been 2000, but they were down here holding training camp, and it was the last year of our affiliation with Buffalo. And I remember him just telling me, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, but it was something along the line is like, obviously you're good at what you do. Just keep working at it. Don't be trying to get to the highest level you can, because if you work hard and focus on what you're doing, it's going to happen. Kind of to the theme of what we've been talking about is it kind of happens at different times in people's lives. And it's just something that I never forgot. And then 7 years later, Larry and I worked together for the Washington Capitals. I told him that, and he remembers the conversation we had. But it's, you can't, as a coach or you're not just all of a sudden going to be in the NHL. You got to work your way up. You got to pay your dues. You got to take the proper steps, put in the work. Like, people nowadays don't want to put in the work. I mean, it's a lot of work, and it takes a lot to get to, whether you're a coach, a player, or a manager. Like, you've got to work hard, and if you don't, you're going to get weeded out. So
yeah, it's hard. People want the instant results. It's just, it doesn't happen anymore. You know what I mean? Without the patience and self-belief, like, you may as well just, sell your shit and start teaching something else, because it's not going to happen right away. Maybe it does for some people, but, predominantly for the most part, you're going to get somewhere. You're going to have to put the time in and sacrifice, a good part. But no, this has been, I mean, I think there's a lot of kids out there that kind of question maybe where they stand, like if they're doing the right things. And I think the more and more these kids hear from people that, have made it, that it's going to take a few bumps and bruises along the way. But you have to keep that mind thought of, like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. and you just have to give it until you get the results you're looking for.
There's tons of failures along the way, Reader. You have lots of bad things happen in your game, wins, losses, injuries. Things don't go your way, but I think ultimately is how you respond to the negatives and turn it into a positive. And I think that's something that if you can learn to do that. We had a coach that once told me, he said we either win the game or we learn. So and when the games we didn't win, well, we figure why we didn't and try and get better the next night. And it's nothing in life comes easy, that's for sure.
I like that line. I think I'm going to steal it as my own. I like that a lot. You either win or you learn. I mean, that's a life lesson altogether right there too. Well, Fitz, buddy, I really can't thank you enough. Just catching up with you was actually really nice, but the fact that we got some really good stuff to throw out there to the kids makes it even better. So yeah, next Stanley Cup party will be, we got 3 months.
We'll see. We're going to be gunning for it. We didn't come here to lose.
I love it. Well, you got a big support system. I know coming out of Charleston. Hopefully, you and Bedsy maybe meet in the finals, and that'll give a lot of Stingray fans something to cheer about.
Well, I'll tell you what. I wish you and your family and your program the best success this upcoming year. And we've got to get together when I'm up in DC. We're so close to each other when we get up there.
Let me know, bud. Let me know. We're here. I'm sure. I know the kids would love to get a little glimpse of the legend Fitzsimmons. But yeah, whenever you're up, let me know. We'll get something rolling here soon.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time today, Reader. I appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you so much, brother. Everyone, Jason Fitzsimmons, make sure you look him up online. He's got tons of good stuff out there, and we'll be looking to catch up with him soon. Thank you, Fitzy.